Today on the show is none other than Madison Butler. Madison is the author of Let Them See You, a fantastic bright spot in the world of the LinkedIn universe, an incredible people leader, industry personality.
Non-functional employees cannot help you build an innovative product. All they do is burnout. And so when you actually start to think about how do I slow things down? How do I give people the space to say, hey, my plate is full?
I think at its core, it just lacks visibility into the human condition, which kind of is your book. Tell us about that. Why is it important for people to be seen?
Managers need to first humanize themselves so that way they can humanize the teams they lead. Because all we do when we lead teams, right, is they mirror our own behavior. So if I'm never vulnerable, they're never vulnerable.
Hey, RecOps friends, are you still losing hours every week to interview scheduling chaos? What if you could eliminate the back and forth, cut scheduling time by 90%, and actually get those recruiter hours back on the hiring desk where they belong? That's exactly why teams are turning to Rooster, the native interview scheduling platform built inside Workday Recruiting that finally makes interview logistics fast, seamless, and predictable. With Rooster, you connect directly to your Workday system. No extra tools, no disconnected workflows, and instantly let candidates self-schedule with one-click booking links. It handles time zone and language differences automatically, sends branded confirmations and reminders via SMS, email, or WhatsApp, and keeps interviewers, coordinators, and candidates in sync without constant manual follow-ups. And it's not just about speed. Rooster helps you see the true cost of scheduling inefficiencies with its TAS metric, so ops teams can track and improve the parts of the process that slow you down the most. Whether your team hires locally, globally, or somewhere in between, Rooster cuts errors, saves 10+ recruiter hours per week, and creates a candidate experience that reflects the quality of your brand. If you're ready to stop chasing calendars and start hiring with confidence, visit rooster.us and schedule a demo today. Your recruiters will thank you. Now, on with the show. All right, what's up, everybody? Today on the show is none other than Madison Butler. Madison is the author of Let Them See You, a fantastic bright spot in the world of the LinkedIn universe, an incredible people leader, industry personality. What's up, Maddie B?
I'm so excited to be here. Industry personality is hilarious to me.
I've been workshopping it because I'm so sick of the word influencer. I think influencer actually is a job title. Influencer, there are a lot of B2B SaaS influencers who get paid to not do work. Their job is influencer. So I think industry personality just brings a little bit more credibility to it, because I don't know about you, but I get hit up by people all the time that want me to put my name on their product or do a post for $200. And I'm just that's not how this works.
Nope. I would like to maybe be a de-influencer.
What is one metric in HR that you would de-influence?
God, I would metric in HR. I don't know if I necessarily would consider it a metric, but I would love to de-influence from people from ever using the terminology human capital management ever again.
HCM, human capital management. It's interesting because when I think about human capital, somebody said this earlier, it is so transactional. And at a large company that delivers things to our doorstep every day, they refer to engineers as fungible, where it's they're completely replaceable. And so it's on one hand, you have something fungible or transactional, like capital, cold hard cash. And then you have something that cannot be quantified, and that is the human experience. And in people ops, we're often indexing on motivating people. And I think quantifying that is probably impossible.
And I think one of the things that I have to say, and I say it a lot, is oftentimes doing the right thing doesn't actually help your bottom line, which a CFO, a CEO doesn't necessarily love to hear, but I am a fundamental believer in human experience over cost, because there are ways that doing this right actually helps you in the long run, and treating it like a marathon rather than a sprint is actually oftentimes the best outcome for everybody.
Dive deeper.
I think, so for context, I have run in the world of startup my entire career. And the thing about startups is they're running so fast. They're always thinking about the next thing instead of the thing in 2 years or the thing in 3 years. And so what they end up doing is burning out their teams to a point where they're non-functional. Non-functional employees cannot help you build an innovative product. All they do is burnout. And so when you actually start to think about how do I slow things down? How do I give people the space to say, hey, my plate is full, or hey, I need a break, or hey, I need to step away? How much better does your product actually become in about 5 years, in 3 years, rather than the right now? When we think about the right now, what we do is we burn people out and then we turn them over. And when we turn people over constantly and constantly, eventually that does impact your bottom line, right? Because not only are you paying to now hire them, you're paying to onboard them. You're paying for the gap in that 90 days where they're like, what am I doing here? Who am I? What is your product? And for me, if we actually just focus on how do we build a product while also understanding that we don't actually employ robots. We employ actual humans with feelings and emotions and all of these other things that they bring to work every day. How much better do we all become because of that?
It's so true. And when I think about historical performance management, a lot of the over indexing on quantification is because when we work in tech, when we work in startups, our powers that be, our executive teams, they come from science and technology backgrounds. The language they speak is math. So we try to quantify things that are not really quantifiable. And I often go back to thinking about how we understand skills. So if we think about this term human capital management, it really stems from this idea where organizations had proprietary knowledge. The moat they had against competition was the skills themselves. Now, what we have is more like market available skills. So an example would be back in the 80s, GE or IBM, they would develop technology, they would hire smart people, train them on the technology, and that was the moat. Companies now are built with open source tools and skills that are readily available in the market. You think about AI engineers, they're expert Python developers. Anyone can become a Python developer. You don't have to get hired at a company to learn Python. So when I think about like this term human capital management, it's actually out of date because that's not how it works anymore. There is no proprietary moat of skills within the company you work for unless you're maybe like in the 0.25% of folks that work at an AI lab on a proprietary technology. And even then, we're seeing less of these FANG-based companies develop their own libraries and frameworks for how software is being built. So that's why I think HCM is out of favor.
It just, for me, is I have always been a practitioner who, I care so deeply about humans at the human level. And frameworks and terminology like that takes all of the wind out of my sails. It doesn't feel very warm and fluffy. Not necessarily that I'm even a warm and fluffy person myself. It just feels like I am treating you like a thing rather than a person. And for me, that is fundamentally the worst way to lead an organization or even a team, is to treat your people like things or like revenue rather than people who, again, have living, breathing emotions and experiences.
I think it at its core, it just lacks visibility into the human condition, which kind of is your book. Tell us about that. Why is it important for people to be seen?
So actually, what it really is about is you as a leader cannot be a safe space for other people if you are not first a safe space for yourself. And how can you let other people see you if you have refused to see yourself? I think a lot of us as leaders are forced into the role because we're really good at something, right? You were good at the thing and they're like, okay, now go lead other people to do the thing. But many of us don't have the opportunity to learn all of the skills that actually go with management. So what we know of management is what we learn through media, through our family, through TV. And so what is that? That you are the person who tells people what to do. And you're never tired. You never take a break. You're overworked and you're perfect, which doesn't allow us a lot of space to understand that as a leader, I will get things wrong. I should say sorry. I should actually hire people who are better, smarter, cooler, more equipped than I am. But because we're not given those skills, what we end up trying to do is enter the room with bravado instead of vulnerability, leading from a place of fear or a threatening aura, if you will, rather than I'm not going to get everything right. I'm not always going to have a good day, and I don't expect the same from you in return. A lot of us spend a lot of time running from the things about ourselves that we don't necessarily feel good about. None of us are perfect. None of us get this right all of the time. I know if I look at myself 10 years ago, I have a little I am like a chronic Facebook memory deleter, let me tell you. But that doesn't mean that I should feel shame around that person, right? I was just doing what I could at the time with the tools in my toolbox. And that's all of us. And so for me, managers need to first humanize themselves so that way they can humanize the teams they lead. Because all we do when we lead teams, right, is they mirror our own behavior. So if I'm never vulnerable, they're never vulnerable. If I never take time off, they never take time off. And that is just cyclical, and it continues and it continues. So really what this book was about, in order to be a good leader, good manager, good peer, you have to be willing to be that to yourself first.
Yeah, I love that. I think the world would benefit a little bit more if some of these tech bros spent more time in therapy than they did in VC offices fundraising.
Or on Twitter or on TikTok or wherever the place may be where they're yelling into the void about whatever. Yeah, please get a therapist. A journal even. A journal.
No, it's really interesting because we're seeing more wellness, self-care, therapy talk approach the mainstream, and that is a really good thing. We need to reduce the stigma. We need to talk about how we take care of ourselves so that we can show up and be the best version of ourselves for other people. I think it's critical, especially if we're having the responsibility of managing other people. This is their job. This is their livelihood. This is their medical benefits for themselves and their family. I think we need to have a little bit more reverence for what we're actually doing in this world of leading other people. And no, I'm not going to say it. Actually, I'll say it because I said it and I was going to say it. I got a good joke. The hardest part of being a thought leader on LinkedIn is having leadership skills and then also having thoughts.
It's true. And I think the other thing that I actually find to even be more of a on the come up is we're hearing lots of talk about wellness and how to care for yourself, but I find it very similar to 2020, right? Everyone's talking about it. No one wants to do the work. And it's almost worse, right? When the worst CEO learns therapy words instead of just going to therapy. And so now all of a sudden they're like, no, you're not making me psychologically safe because you told me I'm wrong. And so now we've misused all of the words. It's again, a great revision of 2020 in a very different way. And so I think people forget like this work, the self-work is actually the hardest work you do, right? It's not managing the KPIs and the metrics. It is like having the very hard conversations with yourself to make sure that you continue to be better because our egos are so strong, right? And when you get something wrong or when you hurt someone's feelings, it is so easy to fall on the defensive, especially as a manager, and say, no, I didn't mean it like that. You're just being sensitive. You're taking it wrong. You were wrong because that's the easy thing to do, especially when it comes to our jobs, because that's for so many of us, not only is our livelihood, it's become like a teeny bit of our personality, which we can unpack in another conversation. But that is actually the hard stuff. And lots of CEOs are not willing and ready to have those conversations. And until they're willing and ready to have those conversations, all of that stuff at the top ends up everywhere else in the organization, even if they know therapy words.
So there is a psychologist, her name is Dr. Emily Onholt, and she publishes on traits of leadership. One of the traits she calls out that's vitally important is play. And when we see our leaders who demonstrate playfulness, who bring a sense of friendliness to their work, it's a core component. What are your thoughts on managers who can let their guard down, be playful, be fun, instead of just dangling a carrot?
In general, I think play is such an important component for anyone who is consistently in a corporate space. It is so easy to lose sight of your inner child, but so much of your inner child sparks your imagination, sparks your ability to be innovative. And so in general, I think all of us should spend more time with that version of ourselves. But again, as leaders, your job is to humanize the room. Pretending you have exactly zero emotions isn't inviting. It's not superhuman. And it doesn't encourage people to want to get to know you for who you are. And so much of what will make you a good leader, again, is not your ability to perform. It is your ability to be you. That is the thing that cannot be created. It cannot be taught. It cannot be onboarded. The thing that brings people out of their shells is always going to be you. And so the less you bring that, the less open your team will be. And I know that we talked a little bit about performance metrics and performance management. I think one of the things that is really missing in general in performance frameworks is understanding why humans perform the way they do. We put performance under this magnifying glass of every day should be exactly the same and every day you're on 100. That's not real life. We all experienced COVID at the same time. I was like a hot mess the entire time. And that was really the first time I think collectively the world was experiencing one thing at one time. And I had managers who reported into me who I literally couldn't get them to pretend things were not normal. I was like, it's okay. Like you can say things are a little weird because they are a little weird. But that happens for everyone forever, right? Like the human experience is gross. It's messy and it doesn't get less messy regardless of the title you hold or the age you are or how much money you make or how long you do this for. Like life is messy and it's gross and it's not always fun. And all of those things impact performance. But you're going to be less likely to share those things with you about why they're performing the way they are if you have never brought a human to work and all you have ever brought is your representative. People are going to get tired of meeting with your representative. They want to meet with you.
When we think about how companies quantify and try to validate the decisions they make, We have frameworks around competencies and behaviors. And you know as well as I do, when we hire and assess talent, there are those competency frameworks that we add to a scorecard. We ask questions tied to those competencies. If we add words like resilience, adaptable, and we assess people, like you said, you're a hot mess in COVID. If somebody's not a hot mess in COVID, can't we just put this projection of that competency onto them and score it as higher if somebody shows up without their authentic version of themselves? So if they're bringing that version that you just said that is not the real them, but we're assessing that, it just seems like we're confusing things and making things more challenging than they need to be in a way where the argument crumbles around competencies that are not quantifiable.
I'm not necessarily talking about competencies in a quantifiable way. I'm not saying let's put resilience on the scorecard, because may I never be called resilient again in my whole life. I'm talking about the fact that sometimes when we're having one-on-ones and we're having performance conversations with people, looking at the full view of the picture versus are they just not performing because they don't want to be here, or they simply don't care about their job, or are they not performing because their mom is dying, or they're going through a divorce, or their husband has an addiction issue. Like being able to zoom out and fully understand the scope of the why, and not saying you make all of your decisions based on the why, but do we not make better decisions when we have all of the clues and all of the pieces of information that we can possibly have, rather than just deciding, oh, Sally Joe just hates working here and Sally Joe sucks at her job. But maybe Sally Joe doesn't suck at her job. Maybe life is running her over outside of work. And the more that we can understand that, the more that we can support her as a human, as a person, and give her space to share those things. But it also allows us to better balance the work on a team when we need to, knowing that good teams are able to shift work.
What do you think is a good performance management system in 2026? Not a software vendor, how we actually assess and measure talent.
So for me, I think the first thing that really comes to mind is measuring performance biannually is never going to be enough. People should not be finding out about how they are doing twice a year, and they certainly shouldn't be finding out they're not doing the right thing twice a year. For me, performance conversations should actually be constant and be a very regular part of work, so they are not viewed as this weird, cryptic, monumentous thing. It should just be a regular part of what we do, because we're here to work. I get it. This is a job. But you should also be given the tools to fail fast and quickly, because your manager should want you to be better. They should want you to be good at what you do, because that's the whole point, right? But so many of us hate having hard conversations. Nobody likes to have the hard conversation when someone's not performing. And what we do is we actually do them a giant disservice by making it a surprise party twice a year. Nobody should be shocked about what is coming in their performance conversations biannually. Those conversations should be used to recalibrate. Like suddenly, I think I'm doing a terrible job, but you think I'm doing a good job. We should really be having a conversation about where we're not aligned.
Yeah.
That's what those conversations should be reserved for, is like those moments, not like a surprise, gotcha, you're bad at your job. No, that doesn't benefit anyone. And then again, it creates this level of fear around performance conversations that shouldn't exist. They should simply just be conversations. So I'm a very big believer in dedicating at least one conversation per month, if not, again, bi-monthly, that we're splitting our regular one-on-one to talk about performance in a very intentional way.
Yeah. And I think Laszlo Bock at Google 15 years ago famously split off the performance review cycle and the compensation merit increase cycle so that people don't equate one with the other in that moment. Because if you go into a performance review cycle thinking you're going to get a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10% comp increase, the feedback part goes in one ear and out the other. What are your thoughts on splitting comp and merit increases from performance review cycles?
I also do that for the same reason. Critical conversations are already hard to absorb when you are receiving bad feedback. It is really easy, right, to immediately go into like fight or flight. So now you pair, the way I stay alive and pay my groceries into that conversation, you are not having an engaged conversation. And the goal of all of those conversations should be strategy. How am I coming out of this conversation so that I can meet these metrics, these KPIs, these things that I am not meeting? How can I start to shape them in a different way? How can I continue to do the things that I'm doing really well? How can I continue to do them well? Those are not the thoughts going through people's minds when we're also adding money into the conversation. I'm actually a really big believer in decoupling them, just even for the simple reason of I don't necessarily always think that companies, especially in startup land, they don't follow it anyway. They're like, oh, Joe is doing a great job. Let's give him a 10% raise. Like very much off cycle, off schedule anyway. So how about having two separate schedules for things and allowing people to just have conversations where they can lead with a strategy rather than a panic attack?
And honestly, that's the work of a contemporary people operator right now is like balancing strategy with panic attacks. Why do you think it's important? And how do you think people and talent leaders can prioritize that self-care? Is it community? Is it showing up online? Is it the pep rally that happens at basically an industry conference? Like what actually works?
I think there's a lot of different ways that it works, right? The way it works for me is probably not going to be the same way it works for you. Like you're never going to catch me at an industry conference. Like I have all the things that I can spend my doll hairs on. It is not transform. I promise you. It's not ad spend. I think for me, the way that people leaders can start to shift the narrative and show up differently is again, showing up differently and changing the narrative for yourself. If you are coming into a business saying, I'm going to protect the business, then like you have to be okay with the fact that you're not always going to do right by the people. And if that's the methodology you're taking, that's on you. And that's between you and your people and that conversation. That's not me. I come into organizations with the very clear framework that I am going to advocate for people because that is my job. And I'm always going to balance it with the decisions that the business has to make. But I'm never going to make a business decision without considering people first and foremost. And what detriment is this to them? And what detriment is it to the business, and weighing both of those options. I'm not silly to think that you don't have to weigh both options, right? Like I can't just look at people. I do have to be able to look at the business and the financials. But there are lots of practitioners who don't look at people at all. They look at what works for me as an individual, what works for Joe as the CEO, instead of really thinking about what works for my organization, knowing that my organization houses all different kinds of people. For me, I'm a really big advocate of building organizations that work for the most marginalized person, because if they work for that person, they work for the rest of us.
When you think about your work that you've done in startups, as the company scales, what often breaks first in the recruiting or performance management or HR side of the house?
I think the biggest thing for me, and it's not necessarily something that breaks, is I think startups in general are super retroactive. They create policies as they need them. They create handbook sections as they need them. They hire HR as things start to blow up. And that for me is the problem, because then your organization loses faith in your ability to keep them safe. When everything is a reaction to a problem rather than this problem was already thought of, people start to lose trust in your ability to care for them, your ability to keep them safe, your ability to ensure that they have a workplace that doesn't absolutely suck. I think the other thing that also goes really wrong in startups, and it's not necessarily as it scales, but one of the things startups do very well is nepotism. Founders love to hire like the roommate they had in college that one time. But when your company is 10, 15, 20 people, you can't really tell that person's not maybe great at managing because they manage one person or two people, or they just manage like a function. As your organization scales and you continue to up-level this person because you're up-leveling the company, this person's going to go from manager to VP to SVP. And now all of a sudden, they've not only got all this responsibility, they've got 1/3 of the company trickling into them. That to me is a very dangerous route to take, because not only does that person not have the true skills of that kind of management on like all of the levels, those are the kinds of people who tend to traumatize their teams because they have not actually had the true working experience of being a good manager. And they also don't have the good working experience of having worked for a good or bad manager, because this was their first job out of college and they were like, VP, wee. So the only person they've ever worked for is their roommate. And without having either of those things, like some of us come into management and of course you're thrown into it, but like you've had a bad manager. So you're like, I don't want to be that person. Or you've had a really good manager and you want to mirror those behaviors. Those people have neither of those scenarios to work from. And so all they are working from is, again, what we are spoon-fed on TV. And what we are spoon-fed on TV is management from fear and power dynamics.
That's actually interesting. I'm curious about this when it comes to first-time hiring managers, first-time people managers. I wonder if they're more motivated to be a better manager because of the bad managers they've had versus emulating the good behaviors they've seen. What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I also think it depends on the kind of manager you have, right? There are some managers who get into this, and same with HR. They love the proximity to power. And so if you like management because of the proximity to power, you like telling people no, you like ruining people's days. And unfortunately, there are tons of people like that. You're going to lead with those fear tactics that you have seen. And then there are people who are like, wow, that was really traumatic for me. I would never want to have my worst enemy experience this thing that I've experienced. How can I be different? And I know that for me, like that's a big space of where I lead from, but I also lead from, so Scott Leese, he's also an industry personality, was like my first very good manager. And so when I'm
Wait, you reported to Scott Leese from the internet?
Yes, we reported to each other on the internet. Actually, Scott Leese is the entire reason I have a LinkedIn brand. When he first hired me, he was like, you're a recruiter. Why don't you use LinkedIn so that way candidates come to you? And I was like, I don't know. Oh, I built a LinkedIn and now here we are. So Scott Leese did that. Everyone can thank him. But when I think about the characteristics I want to bring into a room as a manager, as a hiring manager, so many of them are mirrors to what Scott Leese brought into a room.
Love that. I remember I worked in a fitness software company, and Hanshi Dave Kovar, who is a highly decorated martial artist, he's like literally homies with Chuck Norris and has beat Chuck Norris in real martial arts competitions. He has this giant martial arts school, and he has like a mastery mindset course. And I remember he came to our office because he was a client and he delivered the mastery mindset course. And I remember these 10 bullet points on the wall. And I think it's so true. Like we get to choose optimism. We get to choose glasses half full. We get to choose to be intentional with the person that's right in front of us. We get to choose to smile. We're very privileged. Like I am like a white dude behind a microphone talking to a friend from the internet about work. I'm super, super lucky. And when we zoom out in the historical context of humans, like now is a really great time to be a human being. And when I think about motivation, that's what my mission is. I want to meet the most passionate people. And if they are recruiters, if they are HR, if they're startup founders, great, let's talk. How do we understand human motivation? What do you think are some of the core components of human motivation that make somebody successful?
So this has actually changed for me in the last couple of years. But I actually think the desire to uphold the other pieces of your life that aren't work make you better at work. The worst versions of work and life for me were when I made work everything and when it became my entire personality. When I stopped doing that and allowed my life to look different. And I think, again, one of the things I talk about is we're really fed this crappy dream that the entire world should revolve around work. When in actuality, your entire world is sustained by work. Your families, your partnerships, your hobbies, the places you travel, the things you eat. Those are the reasons you go to work, right? You don't go to work necessarily for the community and because you love it. And I'm just honest about that, right? Like we all got asked to go to our same jobs for free. The most of us would be like, I think I'm good. I don't know, like maybe not. If I was going to volunteer, like I could pet puppies, but tech, maybe not. And I think for me, the thing that makes people good at work is when they can zoom out and view the rest of the world because it allows them to be intentional about how they treat others because they are aware of the things that other people go through. When you make work your entire personality, you become the center of the universe because it's all about you and up-leveling your career and making more and getting to that next step. And what I really found, especially in myself, was it forced my hand in how I cared about the world around me. And so I really think the thing that makes us most successful is when we are able to zoom out and truly care about the world around us and the people around us, especially if we're managers. I just also think it helps to have a life. I recently had someone compliment me at work and be like, it's really impressive that you have a life outside of work. And I was like, isn't that the point?
It's so interesting what you said about what we do outside of work makes us better at our job. And this is actually an interesting silver lining of fractional work. I know you've done some fractional work. When you have multiple projects going, you could be working on solving one strategy or tactical issue, and it actually makes you better at how you're doing similar work with a different client. I think it allows people to have a lot of at-bats. What has your fractional journey been like, and how are you finding it?
It is, for me, like the most freeing thing. May your girl never log into Slack ever again. Or Microsoft Teams. Let's actually put that right above Slack. But for me, it has been really awesome to be able to care so much about this work and not just get to do it at one place. And I think that's the same reason I wanted to write a book, right? Like I, as a human, can be in one place at one time, but fractional allows for you to be in a couple of places at a couple of times. And I will also say for me, the other thing that it has done is taken the emotion out of the room. I get to just come and be good and not be emotionally attached to this work, which also makes me better at it. It allows me to make more sound decisions. It allows me to lead in a way where I get to tell people like, hey, you don't get to talk to me like that. And that's one of my favorite things to say. But it also allows me to just look at who I want to work with. I think I'm in a point in my life, right, where I want to work with good people who want to truly do good work. not smoke and mirrors, not crappy PR. They want to build systems that actually hold humans. Knowing that's not an HR problem, it's not a recruiting problem, it is not a PR problem. Like, it fundamentally has to be built into the foundations of your business. And fractional has allowed me to really suss out the people who want to just say they worked with me, because you can say, oh, you worked with Madison Butler, you must be a nice company to work for. And I'm not about to be that sticker for anybody. And having that freedom has given me a different perspective on how I work, but it also makes me better at my work because I'm working with people who truly care. And when it is not an uphill battle, let me tell you how beautifully it all comes together.
What do you think founders get wrong about building a sound people and talent function when you get there and, oh, nope, they made a mistake here?
I think we start building it too late. Series C is not the time to bring in HR. You should actually start thinking about the way you want your organization to feel the minute there's more than one of you, because you should start thinking about who you're building for. And I don't just mean your customers. I think founders, again, they're so wrapped up in this baby, right? This is their thing, their baby that they've built from the ground up, but they don't start thinking about who else is going to touch my baby and how do they feel about touching my baby. And for me, that is the number one thing we get wrong, paired with let's stop just hiring our friends and let's start asking the question, whose lens is not in the room? And the beautiful thing about that question is you never get to a point where everybody's here. It's not. The earth is quite large. You will always have a gap in who is missing from the table. But I think startups do this crappy thing where they're like, I want everyone to get along and kumbaya and we'll all hold hands and hang out on Saturdays. You do not have to work with people you like. You don't actually have to work out with people you want to hang out with on Saturdays. You should work with people who challenge you, who are better than you, who are innovative. And I think startups, because they're so small, to have an outlier in the room often feels scary. And I think what we get wrong is by hiring people who, again, I used to have a hiring manager at a startup who had the couch test, which was if I don't want to sit down on a couch next to them and get to know them, then I don't want to work with them, which I have tons of issues with from a bias perspective. But that being said, how many startups are hiring because they went to the same undergrad or they wrote for the same football team instead of the quantitative skills that it takes to do the job? And for me, that's where we really get it wrong, is hiring for get along feelings versus for who actually makes us better.
It's interesting when we think about talent density and talent mapping, what that does for bias. I think a lot of the recruiting industry right now is talking about how can we build this talent engineering function where we can pattern match, extract data from candidates into a lead list quickly, get them entered into a sequence, send high volume of outreach, get candidates into an interview loop. Talent engineering project, example one. If we're building a product in a startup, we just go to the company that did that 2 to 3 years before or 5 years before. We just start hitting those folks up with messages. We're really just defaulting to that company's hiring practices. How do you think about representation and inclusion when we talk about talent density and talent mapping, when they're really proxies for bias?
Correct. And it goes back to the are they a culture fit conversation that we were having in 2020. And the way that I tried to describe it to recruiters especially is if you're going fishing and you just skim the top, that's all you're ever going to get. You are never going to get the diversity of what actually exists in the ocean because it's not at the top. It's not the thing that there's the most mass of. And I find we do the same thing with talent. We do the same thing with outbound recruiting. We just go for the easy picks. It's the same way people pick speakers for things. So they're I just couldn't find any Black speakers. I couldn't find any Black talent. All of that exists out there. But if you continue to replicate the strategies of other organizations who are just skimming the top, all you're ever going to do is skim the top. And one day you're going to turn around and be like, damn, everyone here looks exactly like me. How did I do this? And you're going to be like, but I did this strategy. I did it, but you didn't do it right. I actually encourage most organizations to do this work themselves. Instead of trying to move fast and replicate someone else's strategy, find a strategy that works for your organization, even if it is more work. Because then when you turn around and you have everyone who's the same or everybody is different, whatever it is, at least you're responsible for it.
Totally. Say we build a beautiful dashboard. Our executive team is in the know. They know what's happening for performance management. They know what's happening for recruiting. What do you do when the data in those reports or dashboard conflicts with human intuition?
I think we're all going to run into that now because AI is everyone's go-to and AI doesn't have a gut. AI does not have intuition. Everyone has lose their ability to have intuition because they ask everything to AI, which is actually something that keeps me up. at night pretty regularly. I just think that we all have to be, and this is something I'm working on in therapy, is being better at trusting the things that our minds and our bodies tell us and being willing to say them. It doesn't mean that's the decision we make, but I think voicing them when they come to you is really important, especially as a leader, especially if you have a seat at the table. I think for me, that was one of the hardest things that I learned was actually trusting my gut, because how many times did we hire someone and I had a gut feeling about it? And I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be the detractor in the room. And what do you know? It ended up being like a thing that cost me hours and hours of my sanity in life.
So true. We can't have you on the show and not talk about like your journey as a creator. Really cool to hear that like you and Scott work together. Like I didn't know that. The internet is a small place. Like these are real people. I think sometimes when people see like massively viral accounts, they're like, that's not a real person. But actually, I have no idea where Adam Karpiak is these days. If that guy wants to show his face once in a while, that'd be cool.
He's still on X. I see him on there sometimes when I go peruse.
What was your journey like as a creator? Like you've got what, a gazillion followers? Like how does that influence your life and how has it changed things? And like what was the moment where you were like, I woke up and have a gazillion people that follow me?
For me, it was accidental. Scott had really encouraged me to start really writing online. And then I would write things and he'd be like, that's not really you. I've met you. And so I would write content that felt real, right? Like I started just writing about what was broken in recruiting. And this is going back, which is wild to like date myself like 11 years or something. I don't know. And I would write my content and I would like then close my laptop because at the time I was like really worried about people liking me. Now I don't really care as much. But I would write just like what was on my mind. I would have a thought and I would write it down. And one day I was like, oh my God, I have 10,000 followers. That's wild. Fast forward today, I think I have 157,000 followers here, or 20,000 on TikTok. And like I have 47,000 newsletter subscribers. And I had no plan, no strategy. I can't be like, you do this and then you do this and then you do the thing. I know the thing that's worked for me is I have never leaned away from what felt authentic to me. And that's changed over time, right? Like I've evolved as a human. I'm a certified trainer now, like all of these things. I lost 80 pounds. I also let people in on that journey with me. But I think the thing that has worked is I've just been honest about where I'm at in life. And not every day is a great day. I went through a really horrific breakup like a year and a half ago or something like that. And I was really honest with the internet about that. And for me, I think that's what's worked is instead of like going with what's trending or like I should have danced on TikTok in 2020, but I didn't. Like I could have done all of that and I just stayed the course. It's worked.
Yeah, I love that. It's really cool because when you find your own voice, there's so much confidence that comes from one person liking a post or one person commenting or one person sending a DM. It's really not about like virality. It's about impact. And the fact that you have so much impact on so many people's lives, you never know what people are going through and you never know what's going to resonate. And the only way we can really have that impact is by speaking from the heart. It is challenging. I think one of the things I've experienced is I've been lunaticked and I've been like sexually harassed on Reddit. And it made me realize how much female creators have to deal with in this world. And there's like some workaround that I think I want to do in terms of like advocacy and just like supporting other creators. But what advice do you have out there for creators or somebody who's like looking to your account and being like, I want to be like her when I...
And it's funny that you say that. Someone slid in my DMs last night and was like, I love your content, but you're just so distracting on the internet, like with your fitness journey and how hot you are. And I like didn't respond. And then he followed up with another in-mail because I deleted that in-mail and said, oh, so you don't take compliments? What? Leave me alone. I'm better as a concept. Don't message me. I think that for me has had to be something as a creator that on all fronts, like whether it's the creepy hit-ons or like I get a lot of death threats, being able to recognize that the internet's not real. The internet is not real. And I don't just mean that for me, right? Like even when you're looking at creators, it's so easy to compare yourself to them and their journey. Most of the time, like you're seeing little bits, right? You're seeing like bits and pieces. You're seeing the like very beige fridge TikTok versus that's not what their fridge looks like all the time. That is how creators' lives are. What you see online is not what our lives look like all of the time. And if you're looking at me and you're like, oh, I want to be her when I grow up, I operate from a giant place of privilege and I will never tell anyone to operate the way that I do. I take a lot of risk and I have a lot of privilege by being able to say whatever the heck I want to say. Not everyone has that ability. I'm never going to tell you to risk your job, your livelihood, your ability to feed yourself to become a creator. Do what feels right to you and what keeps you safe, especially if you are someone from a marginalized identity or a community. I am never going to tell you to operate like I do. If you choose to operate like I do, I think, the biggest reminder is do not let the likes or the virality or the comments be the thing that you're chasing. It is really easy to then let that control your mood, right? Like I'm shadow banned on LinkedIn every other 10 seconds. And it's really easy to be like, oh my God, they don't like me anymore. But that's not real. Like the internet's not real. Write for you. Write the content that you want to consume, because that's for me what I found was I wrote content that I wasn't finding and that I wanted to read. So I went and wrote it. Go do that, but don't chase likes. Don't chase, again, the like 2 million views. You'll get it, and it'll be on something that you're like, that was what? All of my viral posts are like random things that I was like, I put no effort into that. Like I think my most viewed post was about Kendrick Lamar. It was a good post, but like again, I was like, that's like on the grand scale of like spicy things I write, like that wasn't it. The entire post was like, oh, you did a Super Bowl performance? It wasn't for you, and that's fine. And there are 5 million views on it. And so I think for me as a creator, like not letting it control how you operate in the real world, not letting it have that level of control over your mental health or how you're feeling or even how you view yourself. Because I promise you, especially if you're a woman, it doesn't matter what you look like. Some man on the internet's going to call you fat. It doesn't matter what you look like.
And what's interesting about demographics and representation is, I want to go back to the statistic that I think it was in 2023, for the first time, we saw more female CEOs in the Fortune 500 than men named John that were CEOs in the Fortune 500. And it's like, we need to have more voices. We need to have more representation. We need to think critically. We need to run analysis of our teams. And we need to just have a hell of a lot more empathy and a little bit more fun at work.
Play Pokemon. That's what I do to have fun.
Hell yeah. Madison, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being real. Any last words for how folks can get in touch with you, follow what you're talking about, how to get your book, any of that?
Yeah, I'm Madison Amelia B on both Instagram and TikTok. And I'm Madison Butler on LinkedIn. I'm shadow banned, but I'm there. And you can find my book anywhere books are sold. And I also just launched a podcast last week, which you can find on Spotify and all the other places. It's called Crash Out With Me.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm always rooting for you.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.